Hello, everyone. This is Craig Brailsford with RedChip Companies. Thank you for joining today's event with Enlivex Therapeutics, which trades on the NASDAQ under the ticker ENLV. With us today, we have Oren Hershkovitz, Chief Executive Officer of Enlivex Therapeutics. We will begin with a presentation in a moment, and then we'll open up this event to your questions. I will keep everyone's lines muted throughout this presentation. Users, however, may ask a question at any time by using the Q&A tool at the bottom of the Zoom window. Before we begin, please allow me to read the Safe Harbor Statement. This call may contain forward-looking statements within the meaning of the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995. All statements pertaining to future financial and/or operating results, along with other statements about the future expectations, beliefs, goals, plans, or prospects expressed by management constitute forward-looking statements. Any statements that are not historical facts should also be considered forward-looking statements. Of course, forward-looking statements involve risks and uncertainties. With that said, I now turn this webinar over to Oren. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Craig. Hi, everybody. Good to be on again and provide you all with an update on our recent progresses and advances. Since I'm not sure how everybody is familiar with Enlivex, I will start quickly with an overview about the company, but we'll dive more quickly into the recent advances, press releases that we had, and so on. So let me share the slide deck, and we'll start right through. So this is our safe harbor, and we'll take it from here. So again, I'm sure that most of you are familiar with Enlivex, but I did want to take you through a quick overview about the company. So we're a clinical stage pharmaceutical company. We develop Allocetra as a cell therapy, off-the-shelf cell therapy that target macrophages and reprogram macrophages back into a homeostatic state. So kind of in the essence of the company is the fact that we have a really novel mechanism of action targeting macrophages, reprogramming macrophages, a completely new modality. This approach is using allogeneic cells, and we are targeting substantial markets that we'll talk about, and I'll provide an additional overview in a second. In all cases, we're talking about markets and conditions that are defined as unmet medical conditions, focusing on inflammatory indications. And also, although this is a cell therapy company, we're talking about a very cost-effective cell therapy. So it's a simple manufacturing process. It's a completely off-the-shelf, ready-to-use drug, which leads to the fact that it's highly commercialable, and the cost of the drug is very competitive to existing drugs out there. So the ones that follows Enlivex have read the recent news, and we're going to talk a little bit about the recent positive data that we've announced in our interim analysis of a phase 1/2 end-stage osteoarthritis patients. We also announced the dosing of a first patient in a completely new indication, which is the osteoarthritis of the basal thumb. And we'll talk a little bit about this, and obviously about the recent funding that we did with an up to $50 million from an institutional financing round, a health-focused institutional fund. Quickly about Enlivex management, which I think at the end of the day, this is one of the major and most important aspects of a biotech company. We have a very balanced, experienced management that consists of scientific development as well as business expertise. And Shai Novik and myself, Shai Novik is the executive chairman of Enlivex, and a co-founder, and myself collaborated in a previous company where we sold the company for a US-based company called Opco Health for a $560 million acquisition deal, and also following which we did a licensing agreement and did a co-development agreement with Pfizer over the leading asset, which is a long-acting growth hormone called Angelna. This drug today is approved in 43 countries including US, Japan, Europe, and so on. So without going to through all the list, a lot of experience there, both from developing a drug and from the business perspective. And just to add another important name from our board of directors, very experienced board of directors. Some of you are familiar with Roger Pomerantz, who was former worldwide head of licensing and acquisition at Merck. He was also a former venture partner at Flagship, and he joined Enlivex about a year ago as vice chairman on the board of the board. So a few words about macrophages and what we think that these are very, very important cells and a very, very important target for specific inflammatory diseases. Macrophages play a fundamental role in housekeeping, in responding to immune bacteria and pathogens, in triggering the immune system, as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, regulating the immune response, and eventually leading to resolution and back to what we call homeostasis. So macrophages play a very pivotal role in all of those roles. Part of what they do is clearance of dying cells. And when they clear dying cells, normal dying cells, the founder of Enlivex, Professor Mevorach, about 15, 20 years ago, was a pioneer in the research around what happens to dying cells, what we call apoptotic cells, and he was one of the professors that led to the finding that when macrophages engulf dying cells, they go through this reprogramming process that lead to kind of a pro-resolution phenotype. So those cells, macrophages, they know to activate and they know how to resolve the inflammatory condition. And when they eat dying cells, eventually that lead to this reprogramming that eventually allows them to come down and restore immune homeostasis. And he thought that in some conditions that this process, this naturally occurring process, could be very beneficial if we know how to control it in order to treat a disease where the immune system is either acutely activated and out of control or chronically inflamed. So what he did, he developed this process that ends up with a stable dying cell. It took him 3 years to develop, but eventually it's a very simple process. All we do is we take healthy cells from healthy donors, we expose them to certain conditions that trigger this apoptosis in a certain way, and eventually they express an eat me signal over the membrane. This eat me signal is identified by the patient macrophages and lead to engulfment of our cells and restoring of immune homeostasis. Now, at the end of this process, we irradiate the cells, we freeze them, and they're ready to be used as a completely off-the-shelf. This is an allogeneic, off-the-shelf drug. No need to do any matching. No need to take the cells from the patient and bring them back. Very, processes that are very cumbersome, very complicated, and very expensive. We don't do all of that. We only generate those cells. We inject them either systemically, for instance, in sepsis, or locally, such as in osteoarthritis. Once we inject them to the patient, as you can see here, the macrophages identify the Allocetra cells, they engulf them, they go back into a pro-resolution homeostatic state, and that lead to disease resolution. So this is our pipeline, and we have several open programs in different indications. Obviously, the leading program is the sepsis program. We announced the top-line data back in April, and we'll talk a little bit about where we are with that program. The second program is in moderate knee osteoarthritis. This is a randomized controlled study where we inject Allocetra directly into the knee of patients that suffers from knee osteoarthritis. This is a study that is expected to enroll about 160 patients with a phase 1 part and a phase 2, and we'll talk about it. Following this study, we also have the recent study that we announced the positive interim data. That's the end-stage osteoarthritis patients. So we're talking about patients who are more advanced in their osteoarthritis condition, and they are actually indicated for knee replacement therapy already, surgery already. And we are proposing Allocetra in lieu of their surgery, and we'll talk about the exciting interim positive data that we saw we just announced. And the last one is a clinical program in basal thumb knee osteoarthritis. So we're talking about this joint over here. After the knee osteoarthritis in the hip, this is the most common joint with osteoarthritis. Many people suffer from this. It's painful. It results in loss of function. And again, as all other indications over here, we're talking about diseases where there's currently no approved effective therapy, and they're definitely an unmet medical condition. All of those markets are large markets, and we'll talk about it in a second. So I just want to start with actually osteoarthritis. We made a lot of progress in the osteoarthritis indication in the past few months, and I want to share with you why we're so excited about this. So first of all, this we're talking about very common. It's the most prevalent chronic debilitating joint disease with a prevalence of 365 million knee osteoarthritis patients globally, being the knee the most frequent one, following the hip and the hand. And only in the US, we have about more than 30 million cases today, and it is expected to grow about 78 million. So we're talking from a market size perspective, from about 7 billion today to up to 50 and 60 billion in 2030. Um, Currently, the standard of care in osteoarthritis is lifestyle changes, physiotherapy, pain medication, and where nothing helps, and this is a progressing chronic disease, eventually knee replacement surgery. Now, this is definitely the last resort, and those patients suffers quite a lot until they get to that stage. In 20%, it doesn't work. In most of the cases, eventually, following several years, they need to go through an additional surgery. It's an expensive uh, a procedure, and therefore we are in the need of alternative solutions. So why? I think by now we all understand that this is a very appealing and attractive market because we're talking about a large unmet medical condition and huge market size and a growing market with another aspect that is important is why Allocetra should work here. So the reasons for that is that actually in the past 10 years we have more and more data suggesting that as opposed to what we used to think that osteoarthritis is kind of a cartilage degradation, deterioration disease because of wear and tear and so on. We understand today that it's actually a low-grade inflammatory, chronic inflammatory condition, and macrophages play a pivotal role in the triggering of this chronic inflamed condition, as well as maintaining this chronic condition. And therefore, they become a very interesting target in the past 10 years or so, as a modality or as a target for treating this disease. And I think by now we all understand that if we have a tool to reprogram those very inflamed macrophages that are very abundant in the knee of joint inflamed osteoarthritis patient, uh, we can eventually shift the disease from this inflamed chronic condition back into a normal state. So this is what we are planning to do with Allocetra, and this is why we think that this is a very important and good target for us and for Allocetra. We did have a compassionate case that we treated about 3 years ago. This was a very advanced form which is defined as a vanishing bone disease. So there's already damage to the bone itself. This was a female, 70 years old. We gave her 5 intra-joint infusion of Allocetra, and this this poor lady had really, before treatment, she was in and out of hospital for 4 years, and actually 9 months continuous hospitalization with permanent shoulder port, very, very painful condition. And we gave her Allocetra for 5 injections, and following which all of our inflammatory markers went down, including the CRP, the fluid drainage declined, and eventually she was discharged from the hospital completely um, healthy. We've been following her for more than 3 years, and she is still stable. So this was remarkable, but at the end of the day, it's a single case, and therefore it calls out to do, comprehensive a clinical development. And this is what we started to do this in the past 12 months or so. The first study that we've commenced was an investigator-initiated phase 1/2 study in end-stage osteoarthritis patient. By end-stage, we mean very advanced disease. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have complete destruction of their cartilage, but they either have a complete destruction of the cartilage, or they're in a very painful, very advanced chronic state, and therefore they're already indicated for knee replacement surgery. Again, this is because there are no good treatments today. Um, and we enrolled to date. The study is designed in a way that we're giving a single injection of Allocetra directly into the knee, and then we are following them from up to 12 months, following safety, following the change from baseline in their pain, and the desire to go and complete what they were already indicated for, which means the knee replacement surgery. So this is the recent data that we published. It's from the first 9 patients, and following 3-month follow-up, we've been monitoring their pain, of course, safety. And this is what you see in front of you is the recent data that we published. And those patients, as you can see, from a scale of 0 to 10, their baseline pain was averaging at 7.8, which is relatively high, as you can imagine. And following treatment, you can see a constant reduction in their pain, in their average pain, going all the way to 2.75 at 3 months. So this is a 64% pain reduction. Not just that, we had a complete resolution or complete pain relief in 3 patients out of the 9. So 3 patients had an average baseline pain of 9, and following a single injection of Allocetra, they went down to 0. 8 out of the 9 patients are still in the study. They are still very satisfied with their condition, and that they didn't want to go through a knee replacement surgery yet. And this is, of course, very, very encouraging. And this is the first time we inject Allocetra directly into the knee, and there were no adverse events related to Allocetra reported in the study, and some mild local adverse events following injection. So very, very encouraging data. We were actually a bit surprised, positively surprised, because this is a very advanced stage patient. And actually, the major target population with Allocetra is what we call the moderate to slightly severe knee osteoarthritis patient. And this is a second study that we are running. This study is targeting patient with, as I said, moderate osteoarthritis in the knee. In this case, we're talking about 3 injection to the target knee, and we have 2 stages. The first one is a phase 1 safety run-in. We dose escalate Allocetra, and once we'll complete that part, we will have we will select the dose for the randomized blinded control part of the study, which is the part 2. We're talking about up to 130 patients. They will receive 3 injections of Allocetra, and we're going to follow them for 3 months, 6 months, and up to 12 months, both safety and efficacy. In terms of efficacy, we're monitoring their pain in different ways. The standard endpoints that are being applied in osteoarthritis studies. And this part is statistically powered to show significance between the active group, and the placebo group. So a very sizable study, statistically powered, and we're expecting data from the top line data from the 3 months and 6 months in Q3 and Q4 25. This study is being run at several sites in Denmark, several sites in Israel, so it's a multi-center, multi-country study. The last study that I want to talk about is the basal thumb osteoarthritis study, and this is really a recently, those of you who have been following know that we were talking about the fact that we are focused on osteoarthritis and other local inflamed joint indications, and this is the first one that is on top of the knee osteoarthritis that we just announced. This study also has two phases. The first one is safety running, two dose escalation that will lead to the second part, which is a randomized controlled part with up to 40 patients, so 20 in the placebo group and 20 in Allocetra, and again, following them up to 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. And generally speaking, again, we're talking about safety, but from efficacy point of view, we're talking about pain reduction and function, because those patients that have the the basal thumb osteoarthritis suffers from a very painful condition, eventually loss of function, mainly when they need to grab, pinch things, very frustrating condition, and again, no good, no good therapy, no approved drugs for this indication. We dosed the first patient. From a safety perspective, there were no issues whatsoever. It went smoothly, and we are expecting to continue the enrollment of this study and to get the randomized top-line data in mid-25. And I'll summarize all the milestones and catalyzing point in a second. I want to give a short update about the sepsis study. For those of you who have been following, we released the top line data. We did see we had a very good safety data, but we also saw indication of effect in a high risk urinary tract infection septic population. I want to remind us all this was top line data following 28 days. So we're continuing to follow those patients. It's very important to see the longer term effect as well. Sepsis has long term complications and so on. So we want to continue to collect the data. This follow up will end up in the beginning of 25, after which we'll summarize the data. And that this is something that will be expectable from a regulatory perspective, but also when talking to potential partners. We are expecting to summarize the data and to seek for potential partners to take this program forward. I think we were very transparent from the beginning that this is not something that we can take into phase 3 by ourselves. So we are seeking for a partner, and this has not changed. So to summarize the milestone, just the recent one that were met and the planned one. So the top line data from the sepsis phase 2 was published in April. The end stage osteoarthritis phase 1/2 readouts was just recently announced. The end stage osteoarthritis with the 18 patient and 6 months data is expected in Q1 25. The basal thumb osteoarthritis phase 1/2 top-line data is expected by the end of Q2 25. With the moderate knee, that's the randomized control large study, a phase 1 3 months readout is expected at the end of Q3 25, and the top-line 6 months data in Q4 25. So as you can see, several milestones in the coming 18 months. Well, we have an extensive IP protection. I think that this goes without saying. So to summarize, maybe a financial summary, including referencing to the recent funding that we did. What you see here on the right-hand side is the current status as up to March 31, 24. This is before closing the funding round. The cash equivalence was $23.4 million. We have no debt. Share outstanding as of today, 20.9 millions. And now, considering this recent funding, what we were able to do is actually extend our cash runway all the way to the end of 26, and on top to use some of this money for pushing and moving forward with some additional programs, making some of those studies even more robust in terms of the data collection and so on. So this will allow us, as you can see here, to target several milestones during this cash runway, and this is always only until 25. And as a reminder, we have it up to 26. So we're still very active in pursuing additional potential indication on top of what you see here. So to summarize, a very experienced management team with a track record of creating shareholder value, both from the market, from the business perspective, and from the development perspective. We're talking about cost-effective, novel therapeutic modality with a strong IP. We're talking about targeting low-grade inflammatory conditions in multi-billion-dollar segments that currently have poor treatment alternatives. Platform-wise, so Allocetra is actually suitable. As you can see from the pipeline, we're targeting various indications and can be infused both systemically and locally. Simple, scalable, cost-effective, allogeneic, off-the-shelf cell therapy. Favorable safety profile that was demonstrated, and this is very, very encouraging and very, very important for the next steps of the company, with initial clinical data support of the proposed mechanism of action. And I want to thank you all for taking the time and listening for the presentation, and I'm open for your questions.
Thank you very much, Oren. If you have a question, please type it in using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window. We already have some questions here for you, Oren. Hi, Oren. The latest data showed very significant results in end-stage knee osteoarthritis in a small population. Can you tell us more about what this data show and what we can look forward to?
Yeah, so the data, with all caveats, show an initial promising indication of effect and also a very good safety profile. And both of them are important as we move forward into the larger study. I think that this was very, very encouraging because we are talking about a very advanced patients, and to be honest, they are even more advanced in their disease as compared to the target population of the phase 1/2 randomized controlled study that we are currently running in Israel and Denmark. In which case it's a more severe population. I think that is a good indication, or provide for us an optimistic data that this will be reachable, hopefully, in the controlled large study.
Thanks for that, Oren. Can you give us more details on the randomized control study as far as structure and endpoints? If the endpoints are met, what would be the next step?
Sure. So the endpoint in that phase 1/2 study, first of all, the study is, as I said, it's designed with having 2 stages: the safety running part, and then dose escalation until we select the safe dose. And of course, we also, we're generating and monitoring those patients from an efficacy perspective, but the safety part of this is the most important one. Then once we have the safe dose, we're going to move into the randomized control part of the study. And we're talking about a very large study, up to 160 patients, 1-to-1. So most patient, we build it in a way that it will allow us to assuming that Allocetra works in this population, that it will allow us to pick up the signal very nicely. It's statistically powered in that sense. And the endpoints are the on top of safety, of course, but from an efficacy point of view, we're monitoring their change in pain, as you saw from the figure I presented in the end stage study, using different tools. We're talking about numeric scale that they are reporting weekly by themselves, but also during the visits, they're going through what we call a WOMAC assessment. This is a standard assessment of pain, function, and stiffness of the knee. And to um, to be honest, that the follow-up study that we're currently projecting will be a rolling phase 2-3 study. So it will have a pivotal arm, assuming that the data is supportive, and the endpoints are the same endpoints. The population is similar to what we're currently enrolling in our phase 1-2 study. We are collecting very, very important data from an MRI assessments in the baseline of the study and in the follow-up time points that will inform us about the characterization of the patients, the one that are more responders versus less responders, and so on, and will allow us to design a even more focused follow-up phase 2-3 study.
Oren, can you give us a high-level overview of the thumb program and what catalysts we should be looking for?
So the thumb program we're talking about, again, this is a very a recent. Well, first of all, it's again consists of two parts. Sorry, it consists of two parts. The first one is the safety running, dose escalation, and the second part will be a control versus Allocetra group, 20 patients in each arm, and basically the outcomes of the study are again pain, but also function. There's several function tests that those patients are going through, the ability to grab and pinch things. The where we dosed the first patient. This actually was pretty swift, and we are planning to go into the randomized part and get the top line data, as I said, by mid 25.
How long will it take to collect all the relevant data on the sepsis trial? Do you plan to speak with potential partners during the interim period?
So, yeah, I think, yes, definitely. So, as I said, it's a follow-up up to 12 months. So last patient was dosed at January this year, and therefore a follow-up to the last patient will be beginning of 25, and then we need some time to monitor the data, clean the data, and do the analysis. So this will take all the way to Q1 25, and then we'll be I think we'll have more information in front of us to educate us about the next steps, and to discuss potentially with partners that might be interesting to take this program with us or by themselves into more advanced stages.
Going to combine several questions here relating to cash, Oren. What is the cash on hand currently, and what is your current monthly cash burn?
So the cash on hand, what I can say is that we need to stick to our formal report. So as of end of March, it was $23.4 million, and this is prior to the recent funding round that we did, which the first part of it was, as you all know, $5 million, and the rest is warrants linked to specific milestones, and up to $50 million. The current, the monthly burn rate is something that is not, it's not, I can give you an average number, but it's meaningless because in some cases we have more studies going on, some panels we have less. What I can say is that we are well funded to execute all of the plans that I've just described all the way to the end of 26.
Did the partnership with the B Jing company go on?
So, as you all guys aware of, we did a reprioritization at September and September last year, and as a consequence, one of those decisions was to close the oncology programs. The burn rate in this programs was extremely expensive programs. We all understood, and I think we were very clear about that the regulatory landscape that has changed made it very difficult to get accelerated approvals, and you had to design. You now need to design larger studies with control arms, much more expensive, and so on. and therefore we decided to focus on additional programs such as the osteoarthritis. As a consequence, we had to terminate the agreement with B Jing because the agreement was on the basis of supplying their anti-PD-1 into the oncology studies that we run. So this was an obvious strategic decision considering the reprioritization plan that we executed.
Are you currently exploring other indications for Allocetra? And if so, can you give us any color on those indications?
Definitely, yes. As I said, we allocated, we've been very, very active in the past year or so, exploring different potential indications. And I think you can see just from the recent announcement, some of them materialized into clinical studies. So whether it's the osteoarthritis moderate study, whether it's now the basal thumb osteoarthritis, but we are exploring additional indications. What I can say is that eh, we're talking about local administration of Allocetra to inflamed conditions. And once we can talk about it, I'll be happy to jump on a call and give you another update. But this is something that we're very active in um, pursuing and moving forward with.
When is the 6 months data available for the knee group?
So currently, if we're talking about the end stage study, it's not sure about if I follow the question completely, but we're talking about the end stage study. So we're now recruiting additional patients. We've actually amended the study and increased the number of patients to 18 and a follow-up of 1 year. So we're expecting that data to be at Q1 next year, 6 months follow-up for all 18 patients. If we're talking about the 6-month data from the randomized controlled moderate knee osteoarthritis with 160 patients, the top line data is expected again Q3 and Q4 next year.
This person writes, great presentation. How do you explain the uncharacteristically high organ recovery rates and low mortality in the sepsis study?
Well, we talked about this quite a lot. I think that there are different explanations for that. It definitely was lower than expected. It was definitely lower than when you reference and you look at other recent published studies. And I think it might be a result of the size of the study. It might be a result of the quality of the sites. Could have various explanation. I think that eventually that made it more difficult to draw conclusions with the top line data at least, and definitely the fact that we had more severe patient in the Allocetra group. And nevertheless, we still saw an indication of effect in a high-risk UTI population.
Oren, what are your 3 largest expense categories?
Well, obviously, it's the clinical development, and then human resources. I think nothing very different from other companies, but I think we're very cost effective in our in the way that we manage our cash. And you can look at the company's history and the number of clinical studies that we execute in a very effective way. And this allows us eventually, I think the decision to reprioritize in September was such that it allowed us now to execute a new clinical developments, to have with a recently, less than a year, to have clinical studies running with several milestones ahead, short term, longer term, different programs, risk diversification from the different programs that we're talking about, and no death, very plain vanilla capital structure. We're modest. We're focused on executing, and that's it.
We are rapidly approaching the top of the hour. Oren, could we wrap up, please, with the essential value proposition? Why should an investor take an interest in Enlivex right now?
First of all, I apologize if we couldn't address all the questions. I think we did address most of them. I think the few again, few facts. I think is very experienced management. And I know, this is the life of a biotech company. Sometimes you have good results, sometimes less good results, but we were able to respond, I think, very quickly to all of those challenges throughout the way. And this is because we've been there, we did that, both the chairman of Enlivex, myself, but also the other board member and management team. So management team is extremely important, and that's one. Um, the second thing is the fact that we have a very novel approach, a very cost-effective cell therapy that is different. It's not another Me Too company, but it's a platform that could be utilized in different clinical programs, and this is what we're doing. We have many, as you saw, many potential milestones, inflection point coming in the next 18 months, and we are very well funded to cover all of those activities that I just described. Um, in and eventually, I think all of this is kind of a very appealing and interesting package, and I'm great believer in the company, in the platform, and hopefully we can translate that into the value that shareholders are seeking for.
Thank you very much for that, Oren. Let me just close here with ways to get more information on Enlivex Therapeutics. One way is to call us at 1-800-RED-CHIP. That's 1-800-733-2447, or email us at enlv@redchip.com. Please visit the investor information page created by RedChip for Enlivex Therapeutics. It's enlvinfo.com. There you can view and download the investor presentation and fact sheet and sign up for news alerts on Enlivex Therapeutics. And you may register for future RedChip webinars, as well as find today's archived webinar at redchip.com/events. Thanks again to our many participants today, and thank you, as always, Oren.
Thank you very much, Craig, and thank you all for joining us and for listening.